Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Christina from Our Wood Home. As you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about what it's like heating our house with only wood. We have two wood stoves. We also do have a propane furnace, but we just don't use it. The idea for this video actually comes from my blog post of the same title, and I decided to make this content because every time I post something about my wood stove on social media, I'm asked questions about it. People want to know why we use wood, if it's difficult, if it's time consuming, if it's messy, all that kind of thing. So I'm going to be talking about why we chose to heat this way, the pros, the cons, and what you should know before you consider heating your home with wood. When we bought our house in 2012, there was a brand new propane furnace that had been installed a few months before we took possession of it, and there was also a pellet stove in the basement. I don't know too much about pellet stoves, but I do know it uses compressed wood chips as the fuel. We found out that the pellet stove wasn't safe to use in its current condition, and it would cost us way too much money to fix it, so we decided not even to use it. You can see in this photo that's on the screen, the stove is kind of peeking out from the left-hand corner in the basement. We took this photo on moving day and had the home inspector do something to the stove. I can't remember what, but it basically made it so that it was inoperable, so that for insurance reasons we could still be insured even though we had an improperly working pellet stove. We chose not to replace the pellet stove with another pellet stove or to have it fixed because we just weren't keen on the type of fuel you need for it. You can't just throw in sticks or logs. You have to use specific wood chips, which is fine, but we preferred not having to go to the store to buy fuel for the stove. I'll talk more about that later. So my husband had grown up with a fireplace and liked the idea of a wood stove for a bit of warmth and ambience, whereas I had no experience with heating with wood or even just using a fire for ambience or that kind of thing. So we ended up purchasing a brand new wood stove that uses logs instead of pellets. I will be honest and say that it was quite pricey. I don't remember the price, but it was a few $1,000s. Along with the actual stove, we had to buy all the chimney pipe as well as pay for it to be installed. So where I live in Ontario, Canada, there are specific regulations around the installation and even the location of a wood stove and the chimney, and it has to be inspected by a wood energy technology and transfer inspector for insurance reasons. For example, the chimney has to be a certain height beyond the tallest roof line. It has to be a certain distance away from the wall. It has to be on a certain type of flooring, that kind of thing. And since our wood stove was going in the basement, it was a lot of pipe that we needed to get up past the tallest point of the roof line. So after we started using our wood stove, we realized the heat wasn't quite making it upstairs like we had hoped. So we did continue to use our furnace for heat and just used a fire for coziness when we were watching a movie in the basement. In early 2014, I forgot to schedule a propane delivery, so we actually ran out, and it was in the middle of a big storm, and I was told it could take a few weeks for the company to come and fill our tanks, since there were so many people to serve us. And we don't have small children or elderly people in our home, so we weren't a high priority, which made perfect sense. Thankfully, though, we did have the basement wood stove for heat. If we didn't, we would have been quite chilly. After that incident, we realized we liked using the wood stove more than the propane, and we decided to buy a second stove for our living room. I'll post a picture of that across the screen now. So while it can't be denied that the initial cost of a wood stove is greater than the cost of filling a propane tank, we liked knowing that we weren't reliant on someone else for heating our home. Obviously, we rely on our regular supplier of wood now, but if there was ever an emergency that we needed wood, we could cut down our own trees for fuel. Likewise, if there's a power outage, we know now that we can use our wood stove for heating, cooking, and sanitizing water. And as an added bonus, I use the heat from the stove to dry our laundry instead of always having to rely on the electric dryer. I've already mentioned some positives of using the wood stove for heat, but there's definitely negatives. For example, purchasing the wood is a big cost up front. Stove installation is also quite costly to have it done professionally, and as I said, where I live, it needs to be inspected by a certain inspector to make sure that it's installed properly for insurance reasons. So somebody could, in theory, install it themselves, but if they're not licensed or they don't really know what they're doing, then when the inspector comes, it could cost even more to have it done properly. Heating with wood also requires more attention than just flipping a switch or programming a thermostat. The fires may need to be stoked often, and they require a lot of attention. If no one's home during the day, the house may not be warm when you arrive unless you planned a big fire accordingly. And this is something we definitely have to consider if we go away for the weekend. We have to make sure that either somebody can come to our house to make sure that our pets are okay and that the pipes don't burst or anything like that, or we have to either just not go away for the weekend, bring the pets with us, or do a really, really big fire in both stoves and just let it kind of slowly burn until we get home. Another con, I guess, is that firewood and ash can be really messy. I have to sweep and vacuum multiple times a day. Just from bringing firewood in, all the wood chips kind of fall off it. The ash gets messy when I'm emptying out the stove, that kind of thing. Different types of wood burn differently, so you need to be aware of that if you purchase wood from another source besides cutting it down or acquiring it yourself. We made the mistake of buying wood from somebody we didn't really know. We just found them online, and the wood they provided us was terrible quality. It was a very soft wood. It wasn't seasoned properly, so it wasn't dried out all the way to the core. So it just kind of smoldered in the stove instead of doing a nice big flame. Wood stoves need to be maintained regularly, preferably yearly. I'll talk about that further along, but it can either be an added expense if you choose to pay somebody, or it can just be a little bit time consuming if you do it yourself. Storing wood requires you to keep it away from the direct elements, so space may need to be made indoors for storing wood, or an outdoor structure might have to be built. And another con is that having a chimney pipe alters the look of your home on the outside. Remember I said that the pipe needs to extend a certain height above the tallest roof line? That could be an issue if you have sort of a flat roof like I do. In the picture on the screen now, can you see the two pipes that are coming out on the right side of the roof? The pipe on the left is from the basement, and the one on the right is our living room stove. You can see that the pipe goes right through our living room in a previous photo that I shared. I don't mind the look of this actually. I find it kind of homey. I wasn't too keen on it to start, but it's grown on me. But because the pipe has to extend several feet past the highest roof line, we were kind of limited in where we could actually put the stove. I would have preferred the living room stove to be more central in the room, maybe on one of the walls instead of in the corner, but the pipe on the inside would have blocked sight lines and just not have been very practical. Having two chimney pipes close to each other on the outside of the house looks more pleasing anyways, in my opinion. As I said, in Ontario, Canada, there are regulations about where a stove has to be placed. For example, if you have it in a corner like we do, it has to be a certain number of feet away from the wall if it's installed on an angle. And then if the stove is going to be parallel to the wall, it has to be a different distance from the wall. And there's even certain floorings that you have to use and that you can't use. For example, we had laminate flooring, which we had to take out and do ceramic tile because that's considered heat safe. So for safety and efficiency reasons, wood stoves need regular checks and care. Recently, well, a couple years ago, I guess, I noticed the seal around the wood stove door upstairs was loose and a lot of air was coming in. This meant the fires burned faster and we had to use more wood to heat everything. Thankfully, this was a simple fix that I did with some glue from the hardware store. I bought a specific type that's meant for fixing this braided gasket and just glued it on, following the instructions. In the photo on the screen, you should see a bag that's hanging down from the pipe. That's to catch all the buildup from the chimney. So every year, around the end of the summer, my husband goes up onto the roof and cleans the chimney. So he takes apart the pipe on the inside so that we can catch all the mess instead of it going just into the wood stove itself. And then the pipes also get cleaned out. But if you don't clean out this buildup, it can reduce the efficiency of the stove, but it's also a fire hazard. And since we have 2 stoves, this has to be done twice. We did buy our wood stoves from a reputable company that supplies and installs them, and they also do provide services for cleaning and repair, but we want to save money if possible, so my husband does it himself. And since this doesn't require any special licensing or formal training, we feel comfortable and safe with him performing this work. The wood needs to be stored somewhere out of the elements. The person that we used to supply wood came recommended by a lot of people that I knew, and he's local, and we've been using him for several years, and we have a good relationship with him. Good quality firewood has been seasoned, which means it's been cut and then left to dry out for several months. Freshly cut wood is referred to as green wood. Once the wood is seasoned, it has much less moisture, so it burns more efficiently. If that seasoned wood is left outside exposed to rain and snow, it could become very wet and almost useless for providing a good fire. To store our wood, my husband once rigged up a temporary structure outside our back door, but the deck actually ended up rotting a little bit underneath of it, which we didn't expect. So now we store our wood in a designated woodshed outside, protected from the elements, but previously we had been storing our wood, in our garage and our basement. We had to split the pile because it wouldn't fit just in one location. We currently buy 4 cords of wood, which is enough to keep the house comfortable from October to April. We also supplement that with wood that we inevitably find, people giving us wood that they've cut down or had some extra that they weren't going to burn. If you have no experience with a wood stove or fireplace, you might have no idea what a cord of wood is, and that's okay because I didn't either. A cord is a unit of measurement used for firewood. Instead of selling just a pile of wood, reputable wood sellers will sell it in stacks called a cord. So 1 cord is a stack of wood that's 4 feet tall, 8 feet long, and 4 feet deep. We managed to fit about 3.5 cords in our garage, and the rest was going in the basement, but now we can fit all of it in the woodshed. If you do not know anything about heating with wood, you may be surprised at the amount that we need. Some people think that's a lot of wood, others think it's too little. Our home is not that big, it's around 1,100 square feet, and it's pretty open in the main areas. This means a living room wood stove fire heats the living room, dining room, and the kitchen very well. We also keep our home a fair bit cooler than most people. In the winter months, our house is around 17 degrees Celsius, or about 62 Fahrenheit. We do this to be responsible with firewood, but also because my husband's just always really warm. So for his comfort, we just keep the house a bit cooler, and I just wear slippers and an extra sweater if I need to. On the one hand, 4 cords of wood is fine for us, but on the other, we could do with more. However, we probably won't get more just because even though we have space in the woodshed, we've got it kind of set up nicely so that we can still go in there, move around, keep our wood supplies in there like axes and splitting logs and that kind of thing. So let me just take a minute to recap some positives about heating with a wood stove. Firstly, it creates a very cozy heat and an atmosphere. Second, building a fire with my own hands is pretty rewarding and satisfying. Third, we can heat the house and cook food even if there's a power outage, which I have done on many occasions. Also, the cost of wood is less than filling our propane tanks, at least where we live. Using wood is a reliable heat source, as I said, even in a power outage. Having a wood stove, having two actually, puts us closer towards our goal of having a small homestead. We also don't rely on periodic top-ups of our heat source since we purchase all of our wood at once. And finally, building a fire from scratch is a fun party trick. I say this because people that come to our house and our family members are often impressed that I'm in charge of doing the fires because it just doesn't seem like a skill that I would have, but it is mostly out of necessity. So some people have asked why we even bothered to keep our propane tanks when we never use them. The last time I checked, for home insurance reasons, we needed an alternate heat source besides wood. If we only had wood stoves, we wouldn't have house insurance, and you kind of need that. So for that reason, we keep our propane tanks. Sometimes we have family members house and pet sitting for us, and we know that not everyone is comfortable or capable of using the wood stove for heat. So in cases like that, we encourage the use of the propane furnace. We haven't had it filled in a while, but it's something we want to schedule soon. Another question I'm asked is if our home insurance went up a lot once we had the stoves installed, and surprisingly, it didn't. We live in a home with wooden siding, so I expected a huge increase, just because that seems like it would be more of a fire hazard than brick or siding or something. Vinyl siding, but because both stoves were installed and inspected by certified technicians, we had no issues with insurance. If my memory serves me correctly, we had no increase of our home insurance at all upon installation of our stoves. All we had to do was send a copy of the inspection certificate that says it was inspected and it meets all the criteria. Everything I shared from Everything I've shared in this video is just our experiences using wood stoves since 2013. We're certainly not experts, and it has been an interesting learning experience. We've learned a lot through trial and error, but after relying on our wood stoves for heating and cooking, we can say that we have no regrets about choosing this heat source. There have been many occasions where we're quite grateful to have a reliable source of heat that doesn't require electricity. We had a bad storm a few winters ago. It was very cold and very snowy, and we had some issues with some plumbing. Our pipes from the well weren't, they were all frozen and clogged with ice, so we couldn't actually get any running water into our home. And we also couldn't fix the problem ourselves. It required special equipment, so we had to schedule a technician to come out. But we still needed to be able to wash our hands and drink water and all that kind of thing. So we ended up just filling pots and pans and any kind of vessel we could with snow, melting that on the wood stove and boiling it until it was safe to consume. And I remember telling somebody about that, and they thought it was just so strange, but they were also surprised at how nonchalant we were about it, because it was just something that we do. It's something we are okay doing because we're just used to it, I guess. But we've also cooked on the wood stove when there's been power outages. We've relied on it to keep us warm and also for a little bit of light, and generally we just enjoy having the wood stoves. So as I said, this is just our experiences. We're not experts. I just wanted to share with you guys some things that I've learned about heating our home with wood and answer some questions that I'm commonly asked. So if you have any questions about wood stove heating, please don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below. I will respond to all of those. And if you like what you see in this video and just on my channel in general, I hope that you will consider subscribing. I thank you so much for coming along and watching this video today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.